we have a natural law, but it's also to have a life of reason. So actually, part of being a human being is to have an inclination towards government. Not quite the size we have, and not the way it's behaving, but we do actually have that. We have an inclination to pursue the truth, that God is to be obeyed, etc. So we have the inclination of the natural law. The angels also were given, each angel is its own species. Their personalities, you see this when you're in session and different demons are possessing, and one will come to the surface and the other one leaves. For a while, their personalities are far more distinct than human personalities. Their characteristics are far more pronounced. You can see that their natural inclinations are to very definitive, distinct things, because that's what God inclined them to. So their assigned task is part of their natural law. They still have a desire to fulfill that natural law inclination. It would be analogous to us, because when we get hungry, we have a desire, we have an inclination to eat. But if we had chosen, no, I'm never going to eat, and we're starving, it's kind of like, I've made this decision, I'm not going to eat, but I'm starving. That's basically the way they are. But their suffering is far more intense because their natural inclinations are far clearer than ours. Because they had an assigned task, if they reject, that task is who they are. It's who they are. It's why God made them. It determines their personality. The perfections that they have of their personality all revolve around that assigned task. So when they reject the assigned task, as the demons did, it meant that it was a perfect act of self-hatred. This is one of the reasons why they literally chose to hate themselves. Which is why when we see it starting to replicate in human beings, that self-hatred, that self-loathing, I tell people you have to stop it. First of all, it's against charity. But the second thing is that that's the type of psychology that demons try and replicate in us. Every single one of us, if you have any spiritual defect whatsoever, which is all of you, by the way, if you have any spiritual defect whatsoever, that means there is some area in your psychology that the demons have been spending your life trying to build a psychological compatibility with. They start tempting you to get you to do certain things so that you become easier to manipulate. And this is one of the reasons why you have to overcome any defects. But self-loathing and self-hatred and that desire to hurt ourselves, that all comes from, that's their psychology. They have a perfect self-hatred. But the other part of it is their test was this. So when they were created, they saw themselves and who and what they are, but they also, I mentioned that they saw the relationship with all the other angels and stuff, and so they saw in the other angels and saints that would eventually exist that there was this perfection that was above them, but wasn't proper to their nature, and so they could never have it because the angels can't change in their nature, and so there was this perfection, and so they had to make a choice of sacrifice. They had to be willing to sacrifice this good that they perceived, and if they were willing to sacrifice that and accept their assigned task, then that meant that God would reward them with the beatific vision. If they didn't and they chose, no, I still want that thing, then if they did that, then they were damned. Now what that essentially means is two things. Literally, demons chose a figment of their imagination, something they knew they would never have, over the beatific vision of God. At one point I said to one demon, I said, that's irrational. And he just looks at me and says, yeah. That gives you an indicator of it. But it also meant that they still want that thing, and that's part of what drives their psychology. But it also meant that they failed God, and so they have this sense of failure. You see this among certain human beings, you just have something like, you got to stop that too, right? But they also, that thing that they wanted and the sin and the fact that they were inclined towards a very specific kind of task meant that there were different angels that were assigned tasks primarily to help us, or to do administration, if you're talking about the middle rank, to do administration in relationship to the other angels. And then the people at the top, the angels at the top, were primarily created for God. And then the lower rank was created for us. But there's always a certain sense in which there is a kind of there's a task to which they're assigned. Once they chose to not accept their task, that meant that their will was inclined to negating that task. anywhere they found it. So let me give you an example. The demon Loki, yeah, it's a real demon. The demon Loki, his original assigned task, because I had him in one case, was to inspire people to enter into religious life and to become priests. His primary job was to foster vocations. His thing is that he actually, his function that he performs now in relationship to Satan, serving Satan, is that he actually seeks to derail vocations by getting men and women to become worldly, which we're seeing across the board. This guy's phenomenally successful. So that's just one example. Another example is that we talk about Lucifer. Now, Lucifer comes from the two Latin words, lux ferre, which means to bear light, right? Which basically means that that his principal function was something on the intellectual level. At a certain point, I managed to beat out of him because I've had him in 3 different cases. And he basically said that his originally assigned task was to enlighten the mind of Our Lady. So that's why he was called Lucifer. And that was his primary assigned task, was to enlighten the mind of Our Lady to make her even more sacrificial than she was. He said when he saw her, because in his first instance, everything that was necessary for them in order to choose their task, each angel saw, this is what my task is, and it revolves around everything necessary to make my choice, they saw. And in this, he saw the interior beauty of Our Lady. He said her interior life was so absolutely beautiful that he knew he would always be second best. And that's the beauty that he wanted. So at a certain point I said to him, well, because he was beefing about the title of Our Lady, Mirror of Justice. I said, so really what you saw in him in her was him, wasn't it? Now that's it's a very formal way for an exorcist to tell the demons, you're talking about God. You saw she was the perfect, in her interior life, she was the perfect mirror image of God. And he said, yes, that's why I wanted to be God. Not because of the power, not to subvert his thing, because I wanted his beauty for myself. Which is interesting, because one of his assigned tasks was music. Actually, that God gave him a sense of beauty, and this is one of the reasons why the music we see today is becoming very appetitive and very vile, right? But his secondary assigned task was to enlighten our minds to make us more sacrificial than we actually are. St. Thomas says, St. Thomas is one of those guys that he'll make these offhanded comments in the Summa Theologia. He'll just say, something like, oh, the totality of the spiritual life ultimately revolves around a person being willing to sacrifice their will to his. Like, if he just throws it out there like it's nothing and it's like the totality of the spiritual life, right? So, but that's actually true. When Lucifer saw Our Lady, so I'm trying to give you a sense of their psychology. As I mentioned, their personalities are very distinct. And they have their psychological patterns. They have patterns of thinking, just like we do. And so what happened is that he got angry with God because he basically revealed something about Our Lady. Now, you might have heard me talk about this in another conference if you listen from online, but he said that her entire life, Our Lady sacrificed herself over and over again and never once counted the personal cost. That's why she is different from every single individual in this room. She is not like us. We are not like her in that respect. It's true that she's human, but by the grace of God, she never once counted the personal cost that she would have if she did something that was going to be painful or difficult or what have you. And then he said, and it wasn't just that, it was the perpetuity of her sacrifice. Her whole life, over and over and over again, she sacrificed herself again, never taking her own good, never taking herself into the calculus, but purely doing it because, as one of the other possessors said, when she saw how good God was, she gave herself entirely to him. When he found out that his job was to make her even more sacrificial, which meant her interior beauty was going to be even greater by his help, he said he would have nothing to do with it. And so he said he spat on God because he wasn't going to accept that. So this gives us an indicator. Now there's something that's very important in that. It means that when angels make a decision, they're all in. They're either in or they're out. There's none of this half-baked stuff. See, as human beings, because we're pretty dumb, when we make a decision, it's not real wholehearted, right? I mean, we're like, oh, I'll do this. Oh, that wasn't good. And then we later change our mind, right? And when we make a choice, free choice is basically the choosing between goods, and what we're doing is we're determining our will, we're directing our will to a particular thing, so we're making a determination. But that determination is by degree. St. Thomas says initially there's an inchoate habit there, an inclination, so that when we make a choice, the next time we make that choice, there's a little bit of an inclination, and the more we make that choice, the more our will becomes fixed in something. This is why people who lead a good life and keep trying to pursue the good, it just becomes, that's their goal. That's what they want. They're not interested in evil, that's their goal. But we also see the same thing in relationship to politicians and evil people. I'm not equating them, by the way, okay? This is why you look at some of these people, and one of the psychological patterns that you see that is, we call it a secondary sign of possession, but it's not necessarily possession, but it's a pattern of thinking that you see in demons, is malice. When you see someone, I tell people, okay, just bear with me. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, again, bear with me, just for the sake of argument, we elect a bumbling idiot to the presidency. Now, just bear with me. I know it just seems ridiculous, but just bear with me. Even an idiot bumbles around upon the right thing to do once in a while, but when everything that is done maximizes damage to the degree that they're capable of, that's called malice, right? And this is something that we're actually dealing with. That when consistently, every time you turn around, our country's getting hammered on every single level, on every single thing, on doesn't matter what it is, that's malice. And that's what demons have, because when they make a choice, it's a different matter. With human beings, it takes a while to get to the point where our will becomes fixed in something. In fact, it doesn't become fully fixed until we die, and then God fixes it for us, in the good or the evil, depending on whether we're in a state of grace or not. But as far as angels, it's all in, because they have absolutely perfect comprehension of exactly what they're choosing. When they make a choice, their will becomes perfectly fixed in that evil, right? And so that's their patterns of thinking. Today, I know there's a resurfacing of a particular heresy. It's called apokatastasis is the name of the heresy. It was formally condemned by the Council of Constantinople, and it's this idea that in the end, the demons might be rehabilitated, that the people of hell might still get to go to heaven. That has been formally condemned by the church. You cannot consider yourself a Catholic and believe that, okay? This means that their punishment is forever, and they know it. In session, one of the things that you beat them up and it really causes them a lot of pain is you just draw out some point of the thing that they're suffering, and then you tell them this is going to last forever, forever. This will never change for you, never. And it just takes them down, right? So the point being is that their will is fixed in evil, okay? So this means that certain demons are just going to afflict on some people than others. So very often, which demon is possessing an individual is based upon the inversion of his assigned task. So, and that means that there are certain demons for certain kinds of disorders. So the demon of impurity is Beelzebub, but also Baal is a demon of impurity, Asmodeus is a demon of impurity. There's a number of them that are underneath it that are demons of impurity. But they actually choose, they're specific things. So, for example, we see this from time to time, if someone shows up on our doorstep, if it's a male who has homosexual tendencies and he's possessed, it's sure money it's Asmodeus, because he's the guy that's driving it. And that tells you that the demons are picking at these people and driving certain psychological behaviors. Demons, okay, so with us, I started out talking about how the fact that we've come to contact with a number of different things, and from that we abstract a kind of universal knowledge. So I see a bunch of dogs, and then eventually I understand what a dog is conceptually. Angels are the exact opposite. Their mode of knowing is the opposite of that. So the first thing that they understand is the concept, the conceptual knowledge. When they were created, God infused in them the totality of all of the natures and all the concepts of everything that would ever exist. So boom, all at once they have this perfect comprehension of everything. So all they need to do to know what a tree is just think of a tree and boom, they instantaneously acknowledge, exhaust to the degree that their intellect can, what a tree is. This is true about human beings. All they have to do is think of what a human being is. They know every single faculty. They know exactly how it works. They know how DNA works. They know how disposition works, the DNA connected to the disposition. They actually know how our appetites and emotions work. They know how the interrelations of the various faculties. They also know, just by looking at they also know the various kinds of causes and things perfectly, so they know causes. This is how Nostradamus was able to use divination or sorcery in order to figure out a large amount of stuff that was actually going to happen, because of the fact that the demons can look at the state of things and then they know perfect the nature of causes, and so they know where these things are headed, right? It's analogous to, I tell people, we have a certain knowledge of that as human beings, just not quite on that level. So, and this is the example I always use. If I throw a midget off the top of a building, I know by the nature of gravity he's going to hit the ground, right? Well, it's the same thing in relationship to them, except with them, they can look at super complex states of things and know the nature of causes and know where they're generally headed. This is one of the reasons why I said recently that they know their time is coming up. They know it's short because certain things are starting to fall in place that they've seen in the past, that anytime this happens, God pulls the plug on it, right? And so that's when he just said, that's enough, and he pulled the plug on it. So the demons are seeing all this, they're like, it can't be much longer, right? The other thing is that with demons, so they first were given this perfect conceptual knowledge, which they never lose, which puts us at an extreme advantage because they're so intelligent, they're so knowledgeable, they know exactly the stuff, they know exactly how things work, etc. This is one of the reasons actually you can do a diagnostic in possession, because sometimes they'll say things, they'll make theological distinctions that there's no way this person could know, right? And so that's one of the ways that you actually know it. But their mode of knowing, they start with the concept, and the way they understand a particular thing is they just take their will, because they only have intellect and will. They don't have emotions and a body and all that. They just have intellect and will. All they have to do is think of the concept and then look at a particular instance inside the concept, and that's how they can know you. Their knowledge of you, the knowledge of all particular things as they've happened from the beginning of history until now, have been infused in their intellects as it happens. They literally know every single material thing that's happening in the entire universe all the time. It just means they have to focus on particular things. So if they want to watch you, all they have to do is look at you in their concept, and they know, and they've been watching you, by the way, not to make you paranoid. Although they do say you're not paranoid if they are following you and watching you, but the point being is that they're very limited. God restricts them and limits their ability to affect us, but it doesn't mean they're not watching us. And they're watching us very closely because they're watching our patterns. They're watching our patterns for three things. One is they just want to watch, they already know by our DNA what our proclivities are likely to be, what our dispositions, what our inclinations to specific vices are going to be, and things of that sort, just by looking at our DNA. But then they also watch our patterns of behavior so that they know, likely they have a pretty good idea of what virtues and vices you have, what your spiritual weaknesses are, what your spiritual strengths are. The other thing they're watching for are the external manifestations of grace that God has given you internally, so that they can kind of map that, engage that, and take that into consideration of the spiritual warfare. They also have infused knowledge of warfare, which means and because they have a perfect knowledge of human nature, and because they have a perfect knowledge of spiritual warfare, and because they've been watching you for decades, they know the precise strategy that they can use to take you out, God permitting. This is something to keep in mind. We're not talking about a normal situation here. The thing is like I said, they're watching us, but you have to understand that God regulates every single thing they do. See, we got this idea, which is false, that demons get to maraud around and go do whatever they want. That's not true. Literally, what temptation, when they can tempt you, the degree of the temptation, the content of the temptation is entirely determined by God, entirely. Even in cases of possession, who can possess? to the degrees of possession, because possessions are by degrees. What kinds of manifestation, how long the possession is going to last, what's going to get them out, what parts of the body they can possess, when they can manifest, when they can't manifest. The degree of the individual manifestations are entirely determined by God. They are on an extraordinarily short leash. Demons are phenomenally consistent for three reasons. One is they have a nature that has not changed, and so they're going to behave according to their nature. Second, their sin fixes them in a certain also set of behaviors. They're going to act consistent with that. Third, God regulates them and doesn't permit them to do anything without it being for our spiritual benefit in some sense. This is why demons, even in possession cases, will admit that they are the instruments of sanctification of the person who's possessed. Some of the holiest people I know were possessed or are possessed. I knew a woman that actually reached the 4th level of prayer and started having mystical contemplation just as the possession broke. That's 4 levels. She managed to get up 4 levels. There's 9. Most people never get past the 2nd. And then one of the cases that I'm working with now, she's possessed by Beelzebub, which is the demon of impurity, and I've seen her go 6 months without committing venial sin. She took a vow of chastity 14 years ago once the possession was outed, and she's never once violated it. And so he has become the instrument of her sanctification. She's becoming one of the most, if there's any person that I can say that has the true virtue of virtue of mortification, that willingness to suffer, it's her. And so God uses them. Usually possessed people will say, well, I'm glad I got out of this what I got out of this, but I don't think I'd want to be possessed again. Right? But this tells us, okay, so so that's just how demons function psychologically. And each time you get a different demon, and you can just see by their patterns of thinking that they just have, their characteristics are different, like I said, their personalities are very different. So with us, temptation comes from 3 sources: the world, the flesh, and the devil. And the world only acts upon the flesh, and the devils can only act upon on the world or the flesh in order to tempt us. So it all hinges upon the flesh. But the point being is that, so demons are not the cause of every form of temptation. But they do know the principal way that they tempt us, saints say, is by introducing things into our imagination. And they know from our patterns what we are likely to fall to in relationship to temptation. And so if you notice that you're struggling in a specific area, as I mentioned before, that means that the demon that drives certain kinds of things, so let's say extreme anger. Extreme anger is the domain of the demon Isis. And the reason it's his domain is because Isis, his fall was precipitated by the fact that he refused to accept Christ's mercy for men. And as a result of that, he became the most cruel, vicious demon you ever have to deal with. He's even worse than Satan in a certain sense. Satan has his own set of characteristics that you have to deal with. But this guy is just cruel and vicious. But that tells you that he drives these particular things. And as you begin to have a vice, you start building this compatibility with the demon, and you become easily manipulatable. So one of the things that you can do is you can, start to actually, the principal way that you're going to engage in spiritual warfare is by eradicating all vices from your life and building virtue. Overcome your spiritual defects, etc. And also you have to build a certain prayer life, which is all part of the virtue of justice. And so as you begin to do that, the demon's ability to influence you begins to wane. You see, we got this idea that demons are becoming more powerful. Demons do not increase in power. The power of their wills is fixed. Where they're at in the hierarchy of angels depends on their nature. So how much of, St. Thomas says, the degree of their spiritual substance determines the degree of their intellect. So the more intelligent an angel is, the higher he is. And he says their wills are proportionate to their intellects. So that means that Satan is on the top as far as those who afflict us, as far as the power of his will. In hell, there's a profound pecking order. They never argue with a higher demon because they know he can just force them to do something by the power of his will, and so they're just like, well, I'll just do it. Right? Doesn't mean they don't hide certain things. Doesn't mean they don't try and set each other up to take a shellacking once in a while. It just means that they know that there's this proper pecking order. Part of also the natural law is in demons is that God is to be obeyed. They only got one chance to disobey him. After that, they can never disobey him. Never. This is a very important point. They can disobey the exorcists and us to some degree, but that's only because God allows it in order to build up our strength and our virtue in relationship and our authority in relationship to them. But in session, you command a demon to do stuff. It takes a little while to get them to do it. They'll do it. There's always some degree of compliance. But there's 6 stages of liberation. When you get right towards the end of the 6th stage, he does every single thing the exorcist tells him. He actually pays attention to the exorcist, waiting for the command so he can just get it done and get it out, right? But when it comes to God, if he tells him, because that comes up once in a while in the session, all of a sudden he'll tell you something, and that's an indicator that God has told them, you have to tell them. And they'll tell him, yeah, you told me I have to tell you. They immediately comply, immediate. And the reason being is because the authority structure that God infused in their mind, this authority structure is part of the natural law, and God infused that in their minds. And that means they know the exact lines of delineation of who has authority and who doesn't, who has authority over what and who doesn't. They know those exact lines of demarcation, both in relationship to themselves, but also in relationship to us. This is one of the principal reasons why he went after Eve. So what he did is he went after Eve, and this is what happened. The fathers of the church say that when Adam was created, God told him directly, so Adam was talking to God, and God told him directly, do not eat of the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden. So God gave that precept to Adam. Then when Eve was created, because St. Thomas says, and the entire moral tradition says, she was created into a state of subordination, which means she's under him, and I'll return to that here in a minute. She's under him. And so as a result of that, by the natural law, Adam was the one who told Eve, don't eat of the fruit. Okay. So what happens is when she eats the fruit, she steps out from underneath a twofold authority structure, one out from underneath God, and then one from out from underneath her husband. The two principal functions of authority is to provide and to protect. She was now spiritually unprotected. This is exactly what the demons were trying to do, to get people to step outside, out from underneath the authority structure so that they could attack them. So St. Thomas says the hallmark of being in the state of subordination prior to the fall is that women, that Adam loved her, he was solicitous of her, he took care of her, he listened to her, he actually paid attention to her, which, women like, wow, that sounds wonderful. All right. And then after the fall, she entered into a state of subjection, which meant Adam stopped loving her, which is why St. Paul says you have to love your wives. He stopped listening to her, he didn't take her good into consideration, etc. But he said then in heaven, he said women are neither in a state of subordination nor subjection because some women rule in heaven. So I tell women, okay, look it, you cannot become holy because the curse of Eve is this desire to control. I'm not going to go into that because that's a whole conference in itself. But in the Hebrew, when it says in Genesis chapter 2, it says your desire shall be for your husband, the actual Hebrew means the desire to control. And this is called the curse of Eve. It's something that every single woman has to conquer. I've literally only met 5 women my entire life that I thought she's really conquered it. Historically, they said if a woman can conquer the curse of Eve, she can master any virtue. And in that process, she becomes one of the most magnificent creatures to walk the face of the planet. If she doesn't, she becomes one of the most wretched. Interesting. It's either you're going to be magnificent or you're going to be wretched. So I tell women, I said, okay, look it, if you can conquer that curse of Eve, and that the way that's conquered is St. Paul said, women be subject to your husband. So you have to be, it's not servitude, it's not slavery, it's not groveling, it's actually in a rightly ordered way. There's a whole series of conferences I give on that. It's in a rightly ordered way. If you do that, in the process of conquering the curse of Eve and building virtue, you can become more holy than your husband and then have a higher place in heaven and boss him around for the rest of eternity. So don't go for the short-term payout. Don't try and control him in this life. Become holy and submit to him, and then in the next life you got it made. Okay. But he goes after that, and the curse of Adam, by the way, is irresponsibility and effeminacy. which we see among men, especially today. All you have to do is look at most millennials and like, yeah, I see that. Okay. By the way, I pick on millennials because they're such an easy target, right? Okay. So, but there are good millennials, I'm not saying that. The point being is that the demons are going to use that. They know the structure of our fall. They know how sin disorders us, and that's why they want to do it. Demons are not becoming more powerful in themselves. What's happening is we're doing two things. Like every time we commit a sin, that disorder is their domain, and so we are ceding to them influence in a particular area. So every time we sin, we increase their influence in that area. Their power doesn't change, it just means their ability to exercise it becomes more prevalent. The second part of it is that we, so that's the first part, is just through our sin, that we're giving them strength in relationship to that. But then also the frequency of the sin, how much we're doing it, means that they are basically, because there's so many people sinning, that as a result of that gives us an indicator that because so many people are sinning, they're getting more and more influence in the world. It's pretty obvious. I mean, you don't have to be someone like me who literally, my full-time job is beating up demons. I tell people my full-time job is I torture intelligent creatures. That's my job, right? You don't have to be me to know that things are bad, right? The patterns of behavior. One of the patterns of behavior is, when Christ said that Satan was a liar and a murderer from the beginning, I'm not going to go into the murder part, although he did reveal why he was a murderer from the beginning. And when you find it out, you're just like, man, this guy's so evil. But in relationship to the lying, I had him for 3 days, beat the guy senseless for 3 straight days. And he didn't tell me the truth once, when it would have been better if he just told me the truth, right? They're so wed to that lie. We're seeing that same kind of pattern in our own politicians, in our own public life, where the lying is so habituated that you wonder if they're even capable of telling the truth sometimes, right? And so this is something that we're actually seeing. It's all about, why do demons lie? To gain power, to manipulate us, to control us. Why did we hear about, COVID for 2 years? To lie to us and to control and to manipulate us. I'm not saying COVID isn't a real thing. I'm just saying what they told us about it was obviously a form of brainwashing. I got a conference on that if you want to listen to that. The point being is that we're starting to see these same powers, because these same activities of the demons replicated in human beings. So as the more people become sinful, the more the demons are able to influence this particular life. But the demons also know that God has a cutoff. At a certain point, he's going to say, that's enough. And if for no other reason, because he loves us and he doesn't want us to continue going down this rabbit hole. Every time you think that people have reached a bottom, they come up with some other form of a depravity. You're like, how did you come up with that, right? I mean, there's certain forms of depravity that even the demons say, yeah, that's pretty bad. Even I find it repulsive. There's one high-level prelate in the church that he said about this high-level prelate. He says, hey, yeah, I don't like that guy. I'm like, why not? Even the things he likes doing, I find repulsive. Okay, so this gives you an idea of it. So they've come hard. Now, let me give you an example of what we're doing, why we're ceding so much control. Now, if you just think about it, let's just say, for the sake of argument, every human being on the planet only committed one venial sin a day, only one. That means that God is being offended 7 billion times a day. So the next time you get offended, I don't want to hear anything. That's just with venial sin, but we know there's billions of mortal sins being committed every day. God is gravely being offended on a regular basis. And at a certain point, what happens is if you keep committing mortal sin, eventually God just allows the demons in. I always tell people, look, the sin it is the domain of Satan, but it's up to God to determine how much they're able to step across the threshold. So every mortal sin, any form of mortal sin whatsoever, which I've seen people become possessed through sins of pride, fornication, pornography, you name it. Any mortal sin is an open door to possession. In fact, mortal sin, the proper effect of mortal sin is possession. Because you've taken yourself out from underneath the authority structure of God, because he has specific laws, and you place yourself under Satan by that process of committing mortal sin. Now, you might open the door, but it's up to God to determine whether the demons are allowed to step over the threshold, and most of the time he blocks that. But it also tells us something very important. Because disorder of any form, whether it's physical or natural or moral or spiritual, is the domain of the demons, it means that it doesn't matter if you think something's morally sinful or not. It's still the proper effect. What does that mean? Well, you see, with sin, there's two kinds of effects. There's the subjective effect, so when you commit a sin, it's in the will, and so your will becomes weakened, etc. But then there's objective effects of sin. So one time I was watching this, but I don't even know why I was watching this thing, but I'm watching this young girl, she's 15, she's online, and she's crying, and she's pregnant, and she says, I don't know how this happened. I'm like, okay, I can't help you. Right? The point being is that becoming pregnant is a possible objective effect of the sin of fornication, whether you think it's morally sinful or not, doesn't matter. You know, if you don't think you can become pregnant, it doesn't matter. You can have objective effects of sin. But one of the objective effects of sins, of mortal sin, is demons' involvement in our lives. So it doesn't matter if you don't think it's morally sinful. It doesn't matter if you didn't intend. You can open up the door and to demons' involvement in your life. Now, if you think of what that means, but if you volitionally do it and you know it is morally sinful, that's even worse. So this is one of the things that we're actually seeing, is the fact that it's becoming so bad that demons are just mopping us up. One of the things that demons do, because they have access to the imagination, they also have access to our emotions. Now, I'm going to explain a little bit of thing about human psychology and how demons are influencing this, and this will give us a sense of how much power they have today. So, the way human beings are structured, we have five senses, and we come into contact with reality through our five senses, and it comes in through the brain. It's called the common sense power in mystic language, but it's a part of the back of the brain, and it unifies our five senses and expresses that experience, that sense experience, into our imagination in the form of an image, right? So we know this. You can watch me and close my eyes, and then you can still maintain that image of me in your mind. That's how we know that that works. And then there's a power called the cogitative power, and what it does is it goes back into memory. It looks at this image, and then it goes back into memory, compares your past experience with it, and then it merges that information with that image, and then that gives us a fuller understanding of something. How do we know that this is going on? It's called Alzheimer's. So the Alzheimer patient, he sees the person, it might be his wife, so his wife walks in. Normally, his cogitative power would go back and bring out, this is your wife, and he would immediately recognize that's his wife. But because the cogitative power can't access the memories because of the plaque buildup on neurons, although they have a new theory now about what could be causing that, it doesn't merge that information, and then he doesn't recognize the individual. Okay, so that's what's going on. This cogitative power also has the ability to make an assessment about whether something is good or bad purely on a physical level. It's normally related to pleasure and pain. But this assessment basically puts a perspective on it. Why is that so important? Well, there's two reasons. One is perspective that you have on your image determines which emotion you have in relationship to that image. So each emotion has a very specific, the emotions are watching, and then once that particular perspective comes on the image, they're moved. I'll give you an example. When a guy first gets married, his wife, he's like, she's so beautiful, look at her, she's just so wonderful, she's so nice, she's so kind, she has a wonderful personality, she actually gets my beer when I'm laying on the sofa, you know, so he goes through this whole thing. 10 years later, and lots of memories, the cogitative power goes back, brings up the information. When she walks in the door, it puts a negative assessment on it, and he experiences sorrow, and he's just like the old battle axe. She hasn't changed. Your perspective on her has changed. This is important because we can choose what perspective that we have and therefore determine our emotional life. Why is this important? Because demons can put that perspective on the images in your imagination. They can manipulate and control you emotionally by the perspective that they put on that. This is one of the reasons why they spend enormous amounts of time getting you to follow your emotions. Because if they can get you to follow your emotions, all they have to do is move your emotions by putting this perspective on, and then they can control you. That's exactly what has happened in our culture for 50 straight years. They've been training us, they've been habituating us to follow our emotions. You can't watch 5 minutes of the news media without there being some bleeding heart story to get you, oh, and the next one, oh, because you're afraid. And the next one is, it's just a constant stream of emotions. And they're getting people to follow that. They even tell, well, if you don't follow your emotions, you're just heartless. No, I'm a human being. Okay, and so that habituation that we're seeing actually going on is how they manipulate and control us. So that's the same with things that demons actually do, but as our culture becomes more and more like that, it means the demons become more empowered, because following your emotions over reason is disordered. And they're going to use that, and so they're going to drive human beings to foster that mentality and that mindset to get people to follow their emotions in relationship to this. I'll give you a perfect example: gay marriage. 15 years ago, I stood in front of 40 Catholic psychologists because I'd written this book in psychology from a Thomistic point of view. And I said, what constitutes mental health is not what everybody's doing, because then sin would be mentally healthy, right? Which it's not. And I said, what constitutes mental health is that your mind functions the way God structured it and designed it according to the natural law. And that means that our structure of our mind is to put us into contact with reality. Now, one of the things that emotions do is it causes what's called contraction. When you have a strong emotion, you lose contact with the reality of what's going on, and your focus becomes internally. We all know this. We've all experienced this. Like when we get angry with somebody or something really hurtful happens, we tend to focus on our interior pain rather than on focusing on, and you know this in marriage, right? Your spouse says something that's hurtful, what do? You focus on the pain rather than what would be the best thing for this person spiritually, for my spouse spiritually. Virtually nobody does that, right? So it causes this contraction. That means it divorces you from your contact with reality. So the more people follow their emotions, the more they become disconnected from reality. Right? The point being is that the more we get divorced from reality, the more we follow our emotions, the more we get disconnected from the natural law and the way it functions, the more demons have control and influence over our society. We're seeing it right now, right? I mentioned it in relationship to transitioning from one gender to another. St. Thomas says that can only happen when reason breaks down, when people no longer have use of reason. It's also the same thing in relationship to the LGBT. All that stuff is all connected to the fact that the natural law in the minds of people has become, the technical word is occluded. St. Thomas says our inability to grasp the inclinations of the natural law is either the result of sin or bad formation, intellectual formation. What do you think the last 30 years has happened in our public school systems? That's what we've seen. It's bad formation. Sally has 2 mothers. What do you think of that, Johnny? Now, if Johnny had full formation, he would say, there's something wrong mentally with those people. Which, by the way, you know, in transgender operations, before they were doing those, they started, if you actually watch the history of it, they started doing those in the 80s. But they quickly, they even called it simulation. They knew they weren't changing these people's gender. And what happened is when they got to the point, they basically began to see the same pattern, which we now, 80% regret after they've gone through the thing, high rates of suicide, high rates of depression, etc. from the people who've gone through this, and they realized this isn't helping people, so they stopped. It wasn't until about 15, 20 years ago that the money came in and they made big money. A transgender operation somewhere between 100 and 200 grand. They're making big money off of this, and that's what's driving it. Okay, so the point being is that the more we become disordered, the more demons can drive this stuff, and then the harder it becomes for the rest of us to actually follow the natural law, that is to follow the moral teachings of the church and to do what we know is right and to build virtue. On the other hand, where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more, so that the more sinful things become, the more we are capable of getting grace from God if we're faithful, and the more faithful we are to the graces, the more He's going to give us, and the more holy that we can become. So how do you keep yourself protected in the context of all this? Well, obviously, the first thing is always stay in the state of grace. Never commit mortal sin whatsoever. That's been one of my themes here. Always stay in the state of grace. Get to confession on a regular basis. Receive the sacraments. Go to Mass on Sunday days and holy days, not just Sundays, holy days. Making sure your marriages are straightened out, all of that. You have to also make sure that you're praying on a regular basis. One of the things that we discovered, it took us a while. I've been doing solemn exorcisms for about 16 to 17 years. And my lay assistant who does my initial vetting, my nickname for him is the curmudgeon. And the reason I call him that is because he's a curmudgeon. But he's just exactly the type of guy you want in this, because there's always people that are trying to they just want to see me. They don't need my help, right? Okay, so he's very good at weeding these people out. But anyway, he's been helping exorcists for almost 25 years. And so we sat down one time, and there's a long story behind it, but what we basically did is we started this thing where we started putting people on a prayer prescription, which is saying the Angelus 6, noon, and 6, and the prayers of the Auxilium Christianorum. You can look that up online, there's an app for it. We have prayers of the Auxilium Christianorum at that same time, 6, noon, and 6. And what we started to notice is that the diabolic influence in people's lives began to wane significantly. We even saw people self-liberate from possession by doing this every single day. It took them about 6 months, but they did it. And what we began to realize is that in watching the patterns, because he and I just sit and watch patterns, right? He's a lawyer, but he actually used to do ranching, and so we sit and watch patterns, right? And from the very beginning, as soon as I started working with demons, because I'd written books of psychology, I was watching the patterns, so I could separate out, okay, this is psychological patterns that proper to a demon, this is a human being, and this is what it looks like when they're mixed. And one of the patterns that we started to notice is that when people do that on a regular basis, the demons were basically vacating, or it kept people immune from diabolic attack. Well, two things started to emerge. The first is that exorcists are starting to notice that most liberations are now revolving, not all, but most liberations of people who are possessed are revolving around two areas of Catholic doctrine, either the incarnation or the passion, specifically the precious blood. And so we started noticing that a lot of people were being liberated because it had something to do with one of those, the connection to one of those two doctrines. The second thing that we started to notice was it was the same reason why exorcists used to say that the way you break diabolic oppression, which is attack from the outside, is by just increasing your prayer life, and over the course of time it would just slowly taper off. But what we started to notice is that the common element in people who are diabolically obsessed, people who are being attacked through oppression, even people who are possessed, was an elementary lack of discipline in their prayer life or spiritual life. Elementary. I don't care if you're saying the rosary every day. That's not what I'm talking about. You should. You need to be saying the rosary every day. But we're talking about something that requires a consistent self-denial day after day. Getting up at 6 and saying the Angelus at 6 and doing the prayers of the Auxilium Christianorum. Can't tell how many people, well, can I get up at 7? No, it has to be at 6. It's that discipline of maintaining that on a regular basis is what actually breaks the diabolic hold over them, and they stop attacking the people. So it's this elementary lack of discipline in people's spiritual life. So if you want protection, you have to start developing a consistent prayer life, but you also need to be engaging in forms of mortification where it's consistent. It requires daily self-denial. It doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be something in which you're doing that on a consistent basis. This is something which we do even in our own community, right? Because our community, which does exorcism, we pray 3 to 4 hours a day, 3 to 4 hours. And that's what keeps us largely immune. The other thing is too, is when we're in solemn session, we're fasting 6 days a week on 1 meal a day. We do it consistently, and that's what keeps us protected. We know it's not us, we know it's God who's honoring our sacrifice for that. But it's that consistent discipline that keeps people immune. The other thing is too is again, you can say the prayers of the Auxilium Christianorum. It's a group that was started by 2 exorcists. We think there's about 400,000 people worldwide saying the prayers, and it's actually a group. It doesn't take long to say the prayers, 5 to 7 minutes a day. If you say it every day, Everybody that's a member, and all you have to become a member, say the prayers, everybody who's a member is praying for everybody else who's in the group. And so as a result, you're literally plugging into the prayers of 400,000 people for your spiritual protection, for you and your family. The other thing is we've seen people liberated from possession just saying those prayers. It's a phenomenal diagnostic tool. One time this one family was having problems with their daughter, and I said, well, here, start saying the prayers of their Exum Christianorum. From the time they started saying those prayers to the time they stopped, the daughter would scream uncontrollably. She didn't even know they were praying. So this is an indicator that the demons, they don't like these things, right? So that's always a good sign. Developing virtue, making sure you eradicate any vice or any defect. You have to know the mechanics of the spiritual life. You actually have to also know the Catholic faith. We are not living in a time where you can be ignorant of your Catholic faith. If you are, you will get mopped up. Not just by what's going on in a culture, but by the demons themselves. Every single individual that we deal with that is possessed has some failure of understanding in some point of Catholic doctrine. Every single one of them. We are also finding that a vast majority of the people that show up on our doorstep don't even understand the basic catechism of the Catholic Church. They don't understand even the basics. We are not living in a time in which you can do this, especially as priests and bishops get weirder and weirder. Fortunately, you got good priests here. But as they get weirder and weirder and weirder, which is happening, you just watch it. It's like a daily score. You can sit back, get the popcorn, and see which bishop said what nutty thing, right? The fact is that you have to know your faith. Because if you don't know your faith, you're likely to do something that's going to cause you harm spiritually. So this is something that the demons are going to do. The other part of it is demons attack vocation, which means they're always going to attack marriage. How do they attack the marriage? Remember this perspective on the image? The first thing they do is put a perspective on the image of one spouse to another in order to psychologically divide them. If you feel you're psychologically divided from your spouse, you've already been mopped up. They've won to some degree, and you're going to have to fight that. You're going to have to start looking at your spouse different. Right? And I tell women, because one of the aspects of the curse of Eve is that when Eve ate the fruit, she's like, what if he doesn't eat the fruit, right? And then what does he do? Afterwards, what's the first thing Adam does when God says, why'd you do this? He threw her under the bus. So as a result, women, part of the curse of Eve is they think their husband, and I tell women this, yes, we all know, your husband is the dumbest guy that walks the face of the planet. We all know that. We know your husband's dumb. We all know that. That's what they have to fight and deal with, right? By the way, your husband might be dumb, but the point being is that, and two, sometimes the wife will say, what do you think? I mean, I get it, okay. But it's also the same thing in relationship to the wife. I mean, the guys can, talks constantly. They did brain studies. They found out, just to lighten this a little bit before I finish up and we go to Q&A. When they did brain studies, they found out that women get 10 times the amount of pleasure drug in their brains when they talk than men do. All you have to do is look at it. The guy's sitting there, and the wife's like, no. All right. But I tell people, that's actually a perfection. It's just immoderated. Here's why. They discovered this boy in the woods it was in the 1920s, I think it was. There was a boy who was about 10 years old running in the woods of Germany. He was naked running around. He was running so fast he could actually keep up with the deer, and they actually think that the wolves were the ones that nurtured this kid to the point where he was running around, right? Well, they captured the kid, and he knew zero language. So they tried to teach him a language, but what they found out is that he could never master definite articles or indefinite articles. He just couldn't, like us and thus, he just couldn't get them. And philologists for the longest time said, well, they just must not have trained him, right? So then what happens is, this was in the 1980s, they found a girl who was 12 years old. Her parents thought she was retarded, so they had locked her in this room and fed her, and they never taught her, never let her out, never let anything, and so she literally knew no language. So then they tried to teach her, same problem, she could not master definite articles. You actually see this with people in certain Asian languages where there aren't definite articles. When they start learning English, they have a very hard time mastering definite articles and indefinite articles, but also number, right, in relationship to certain things. And so then they started doing brain studies, and what they found out is, first of all, I'm sure you've all noticed, especially if you've gone to another country and you're learning the language, that women speak much more clearly than men do as a general rule. What they found out is that in the beginning stages, for the first 5 years of the child's life, the neurons are starting to develop specific pathways. And if the mother specifically doesn't talk to the child on a regular basis, those neurons do not develop the pathways, and it causes literal brain damage. So I tell people, the inclination that God gave to women to talk is a perfection. It's just it's meant for the children and not the husband. Okay, why is all this so important? Is because the demons are going to use even our perfections against us, right? And they're going to attack marriage, they're going to attack your vocation, they're going to attack all sorts of things, and you just have to be, you don't be paranoid. You know, I'm one of those guys that, you know, when I get done beating up a demon, I'll tell you a story that's kind of funny, but I get done beating up this demon, I'm done. I'm ready to go have a cigar and some scotch, right? And this one time, this one demon, it took me a while to figure out what he was doing, but he was causing super vivid dreams at night to me. And it took me a little while to get a handle on it, to stop him from doing that. But in the dreams, he was actually revealing to me his experience of the sessions. And so one of the things that he revealed in one of these dreams was that he was incensed at the fact that during the sessions I would just show up, beat him mercilessly, and then just walk off like nothing happened. Just really annoyed him. Okay. So, that being the case. So to keep yourself protected, the main thing is to do it. If you lead an authentic Catholic life in all of its richness, that means not just Mass, but also using the sacramentals that the Church offers, like the Benedict Knell, the scapulars, things like that, using holy water, etc. Living a full Catholic life as it's understood from the tradition coming to us, your odds of becoming extraordinarily diabolic influence are nil. You're going to be tempted, but that's because that's just our lot in life until we die. But so everybody suffers that to some degree or another. Even Christ suffered it, for our sake, of course. Not because he was weak, but quite the contrary. So the point being is that if you're leading an authentic Catholic life, your odds of becoming diabolically influenced are very rare, and you're less likely to suffer extraordinary temptations. One last thing. Remember this point where I was talking about elementary discipline and how it keeps demons away? One of the patterns we just sorted out in the last year that we were watching is that families who have not lost a child, and each child in the family, when they reach the age of majority, continues leading the Catholic faith, they have one thing in common, and that is this elementary discipline. There's a consistency in self-denial in the family on a regular basis. And this means it was, requiring them to pray at certain times, or requiring them to do self-denial, requiring them to do certain things, fasting on a regular basis, requiring the children to do that so that when they come out the other end, the percentage of loss was practically nil. Even families that prayed together, a lot of times they would stay together, but we found that undergirding that has to be this elementary discipline that you have to instill in your children. And that's one of the principal ways you will protect them as well. Oh, and last, stay under the authority structure, both in the church, so you have to stay in the church and stay under its authority structure, because that's where one of the primary aspects of authority is, but also you have to follow this traditional Catholic understanding of the family structure and its authority structure within the family. The husband has to be the head of the household. And I'm not saying this because I'm against women. Quite frankly, there's all sorts of women that are holier than their husbands. The issue isn't whether you have power or not. That's demon talk. If you actually look at the feminist movement, it is the curse of Eve on steroids. But if you follow the traditional Catholic understanding of the husband is supposed to love his wife, which means he's going to exercise authority not for his sake but for hers. He'll be sacrificial for her, he'll love her, he'll do what he needs to do in order to what's best for her. Then on the other hand of it, if she submits, then she can stay under that authority structure and she's likely to be protected. It's the same thing with children. We know this. We know that when children step out from underneath the authority structure of their parents, they get hurt. It's the kid who's playing in the yard. You tell the kid, don't go run out into the street. He runs out in the street and he gets run over, right? Because he didn't stay underneath the authority structure. The same thing is true even on a spiritual level. So follow that traditional family structure. Do it in a rightly ordered way, in a loving way, and then as a result of that, then over the course of time, it will provide that level of protection. Okay.